The greatest leaders in business look for the emerging stories in their organization and use the data to choose their preferred outcome. What outcome do you want in your business? Listen to the stories of industry veterans, coaches, and consultants so you can choose your preferred business outcome. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the brand new episode of Business Blind Spots Exposed. If you're joining us for the first time, let me tell you a little bit about why I started this podcast. And it all started with this whole thing called my ego. I used to believe that I need to be the smartest guy in the room and just read, and just absorb information because it's all about how smart I was. But then one fine day, it just occurred to me that no matter how fast I read, I couldn't read faster than 50 other people. So I can never actually always be in the lead. Then it just occurred to me, what if I made all those 50 people and the 25, 30, 50 years of experience that they've had, and they were just a phone call away? That actually amplifies me. Gosh, having that network of people, I don't know if you can use the word Rolodex anymore, but having that Rolodex of people that can help me see what my blind spots are, that becomes magic to me. So this podcast is all about that idea that there are people out there who are exceptionally gifted at what they do. They've got the bruises, cuts, and scars to prove it, and stories and lessons to share so that I, as well as maybe you, can start to see what some of those blind spots and maybe don't have to go through it yourself. And today I've got the distinct pleasure of having Jeff Nischwitz with me. Jeff, how you doing?
Wonderful, Vinay. Excited to be with you for this blind spot conversation.
Yeah, well, I as I'm getting older and more mature in my thinking, I'm starting to realize how many more blind spots there are than I actually used to think they were. Someone told me a long time ago, the wise man or woman is the one who knows how much they don't know, as opposed to how much they do know. But so let me tell you a little bit about Jeff and why I brought him as a guest on the podcast here, because I think you'll see a little bit about what the types of nuggets that you'll get from and the pieces of wisdom that you're going to get from Jeff. So Jeff is known as the snow globe shaker. He loves shaking up how leaders think, and he's on a mission to help people shift the way they lead and thereby shift their leadership impact. I always talk about this idea of creating greater effectiveness, not efficiency. And I think that aligns and is congruent with the way Jeff thinks. He's the founder of the Nischwitz Group, a speaking, consulting, and coaching company that transforms people, leaders, and cultures, organizations, one truth at a time. What I really love about Jeff and all the conversations I've had with him is he's not here to just tell you what you want to hear. He's here to ask you the deeper question that makes you go, I always find that when people have to stop for a second and think about why they just gave that answer, that's when you're starting to open a doorway into the next level of experience. And that's what Jeff is really good at. He's also co-founder of Cardivera and co-hosts the Leadership Junkies podcast. I've listened to a number of episodes. I was a guest on the Leadership Junkies podcast. Fantastic podcast. I recommend that you subscribe and listen to it. Personal development books, you've got 4 of them, including Just One Step, Walking Backwards to the Present on the Camino Trail. Working on another book called Snow Globe Leadership Shaken, Not Settled, which is going to be, which I think you just recently published. Is that right?
Just hit the market a few weeks ago.
So if anything, I think you'll learn from Jeff and listening in here that there's a lot that Jeff's going to do to help you kind of shift what I call your perspective and how you view the world. Jeff, is that a fair way to say what you do for leaders and leadership?
Oh, it's as dead on as you get. I think it was originally Wayne Dyer said something like, when you change your perspective, the world changes in front of you. And I really believe it because I've experienced it and do every day. And it's what I do for myself and for anybody, frankly, anybody I interact with. Even if they're not clients, I tend to ask questions, not with a general mission, but not necessarily a specific intent to have them see something different and then consider it. Like when I say, you talk about one truth at a time, people say, how do you know the truth? I said, it's not the truth, it's my truth. And I'm inviting people to say, well, this is what I think is true. And just what you said, I love that phrase and the face you made of, that's to me the moment of opportunity for real change, that huh, I wonder if it's really true. I wonder if something else is true.
Something that goes through my head just as you're saying that is, COVID-19 is something that has shaken the snow globe up a bit, right? To use the phrase there or the analogy there. And I feel like where a lot of people had difficulty around, and this is a broad generalization here, right? Where a lot of people had difficulty with COVID when it first kind of started to impact the world, is the idea that they were really so focused on this executive function, right? Step one, step two, step three, repeat. The why didn't matter so much, but hey, I just got to do this process. I got the how. And it hurt when all of a sudden that step 1, 2, and 3 didn't work that way. Now it was all of a sudden 2, 1, 3, or whatever that permutation was. The world had changed, and it made it very difficult for them to adapt to that change because they were in working from detail. How does that resonate with you in terms of kind of how you talk to some of leadership?
Well, I think COVID's a big topic, and it has so much impact personally, professionally, in our businesses, everywhere. And to your point, two big things come to mind. One is from a individual perspective. I think what COVID did is it brought to light something that was true for decades. It just brought it to light, shone a light on the fact of how little we control. And I will tell you, emotionally, I navigated COVID pretty well because I had already embraced the reality that I didn't control much, except me. And I think what it brought to light was our natural instinct for victimhood. And that translates in victimhood in the sense we tend to think that victims are these people that we're going to call them, they're all victim-y or they whine. But to me, victimhood is any time that I'm looking at something outside myself. This happened to me. I can't do this now because of that. Well, that's a victim statement. The question is, what can I do? What can I do to change it? If I can't change it, then I'm going to let it go. So individually, we dealt with this reality that we don't control much, virtually nothing outside of ourselves. In the corporate world, and I think you might have used the word make adjustments. And I think it's an important question because what a lot of leaders and organizations have done during COVID is react and adapt. React and adapt. And for me, that's not innovation. That is like that word adjustment. This happened, so I'm going to do this different. And I think the opportunity of COVID, and we still got it, some opportunities time-wise have been missed, is to rethink things, fundamentally rethink things, and really create something new to innovate. And we're seeing, this is another topic, but we're seeing this right now because as we move towards some better, people keep saying we're coming out of COVID. I don't know what that means anymore, but we're coming to a new understanding of COVID. Yeah. I mean, how many companies have said, well, we thought we'd be back to in the office, some version of it in January. Here comes Omicron or Omicron, whatever it's called. It feels like a Autobot movie kind of thing, who's the good guy and the bad guy here? They all look like creatures. And now they're saying, what do we do now? Are we hybrid? Why are we hybrid? What's it look like? And these new issues are coming up. And too often, I think organizations and leaders are just reacting instead of saying, let's be thoughtful and let's blow this up and start over and rethink work. Because here's the final point. You and I talked about this on the podcast. They call it the Great Resignation. I think you called it the Great Disengagement. And my word for it is the Great Reassessment. Yeah. The workforce is reassessing what it means to work and what life is and what life and work is. And a lot of companies are not reassessing. They're just reacting.
Yeah. So I had a conversation last night with someone who is well entrenched in a particular industry. And as we were talking about sort of the shifts that have been starting to occur in that industry, he referenced that, the whole idea of blue ocean strategy. And what, just as you're saying this, what the whole concept that I understood of blue ocean strategy versus a red ocean strategy is kind of what an Apple has done versus a Dell. They're both computer companies at the end of the day, but the way Apple sees themselves, it's more effect and cause as opposed to Dell, who is cause and effect. And it seems like, we're just splitting hairs here, but they're two completely different companies. Apple's a movement and people don't think of them as a computer company. And the reason why is because they're leading with intention. I'm going here. Would you like to follow? As opposed to Dell. I mean, I'm not putting Dell down. They're a fantastic company. but their approach is different. As in, hey, what would you like? How does that resonate with you? Does that?
Well, it absolutely does. In fact, we could have a whole separate conversation about leadership and concept of Steve Jobs, because I think personally, I'll just throw this out. Personally, I don't think of him as a great leader of people.
Yeah.
I think he's an incredible, off the charts leader of innovation.
Yeah.
But I think it was his biography. A line I loved is he was asked if they, does Apple do customer surveys? And he said, we never do surveys, because how do you ask people about something they've never seen before?
That's right.
So they are a company that creates by design. That's their mission, is to create and to transform how people experience their lives, not just technology. Dell creates great computers that are very functional. So I loved your language. You and I speak the similar language. Apple is about creation and effectiveness. Dell, to me, absolutely about efficiency.
Yeah.
It's a very efficient equipment. It functions well. It allows you to complete your work, but it's not transformative.
And the reason I want to talk about those two and maybe set that framework here, and I'd love your thoughts on this, is because in that context of COVID, the way I understand and perceive both of those companies and the way they react and the leadership of those companies, Dell's trying to figure out, all right, where are my customers going now, right? Reacting. Whereas Apple said, that's fine. All right. The message is the same. I mean, maybe the channels by which we communicate that message has changed, but we're still heading for the same mountain that we're trying to conquer. And our people will still follow us to that mountain because that's what they believe. That's what they believe in. They believe in our mission and that vision. Does that resonate with you as well?
It resonates. And this is the layers. This to me brings up the layers of leadership, like peeling an onion and the layers of the onion. Yes, I agree with you. And we also know, and I don't know my time frame here, it was the last 3 or 4 months, Apple made quite a misstep in what they believed their people were following.
Yeah.
Because I believe it was Apple that, basically made this decision. We're coming back to the office. And what? It was like 50 or 60,000 employees said, yeah, no, we're not.
That's right.
And then there was like this huge petition was sent around, because I think Apple fell into the trap of people have always followed us because of our mission.
Yeah.
And they found a place that, yeah, maybe we're not. Yeah, your mission didn't change. How you're doing business didn't change. You're doing the effect, then the cause, yet there was still a missing link, a missing ingredient. So blind spot, right? I guess if you ask them after the fact, did you expect this? I'm pretty sure they'd say, yeah, no, we did not. Blind spot.
That's right. Hang their head in shame a little bit and go, yeah, that one kind of caught us a little by surprise. And so let's bring this all back to this whole idea of snow globe leadership, right? I mean, I think everyone gets the analogy, right? You're shaking things up. We've kind of set sort of a little bit of a scenario here around, COVID executive function versus kind of leading with intention. Talk to me about snow globe leadership. How does that all create? I mean, it's taking people, shaking that snow globe up a little bit and taking them from, hey, we're just in a react, more respond. Is that about the right way to say it?
It is, but I want to clarify something, because words matter here. You said taking people from somewhere. And the concept of snow globe leadership and the shakeup is an internal. Yeah. I'm going to shake myself up. Now, I hope others will follow me in the shaking, because one of the things people don't like is to have their snow globe shook. What you want to do is you want to model it so that others say, I like the outcome of that. I like that experience, so I want it too. The concept of the snow globe shakeup came to me 4 or 5 years ago during a speech. I don't even think I owned a snow globe at the time, frankly. I don't think I did. And all of a sudden, I'm literally in the middle of the speech thinking about snow globes and shaking them up. And what hit me was snow globes are all pretty much the same. They're typically globes, and there's an idyllic scene in them. There's something you want to look at. There's something pretty, whether it's the farmhouse or a beach or a historical monument, or I've got some here with butterflies in them. It's very pretty. You want to look at it. But the magic of the snow globe is the shake. That's why it exists. It exists to shake. And as I talked to people, I found out that people with snow globes rarely shook them. And I said, why don't you shake it? And they said, well, I guess probably because it's good enough as it is. And then I thought, so where there's this form of settling and we're not doing what we're meant to do, we're not on purpose, it's good enough. And then I thought, well, when we do shake things up, often we shake things up, but we don't actually change anything. We just disrupt without intention and different action and different perspectives. And all of a sudden, and I love this, I didn't even see this coming because it was creating it on stage. When you stop shaking a snow globe, immediately it starts to settle. And I thought, yeah, that's what happens. You shake things up and nothing really changes. Your team sees it and says, wait a minute, we were going this other direction, but we're still doing the same thing, leading the same way. So it's about shaking things up internally, mainly my perspectives. The actions follow the shifts in perspective, and remembering how easy it is to settle. And I need to constantly shake it. I need to shake things up, even if it means just to say, I wonder if this is a different perspective worth considering. And I might say no at the end, but at least I considered it. That's the key. Making decisions more thoughtfully, intentionally, and with greater purpose and intention.
And I do appreciate you making that distinction, taking versus, I think probably the better choice is inviting, right? Inviting them to that place to say, hey, look, there's this idyllic scene that you can get to if you're so interested in shaking the snow globe, right? I will tell you, let me talk about myself. If you'd come to me 10 years ago, I told you this whole podcast was about this idea that I used to think it was all about being the smartest guy in the room. And I started finding out that you start to hit the ceiling really fast if you're the smartest guy in the room because nobody else wants to be there in the room with you. So how can I start getting other people to continue to raise everyone else to level? Not everybody's ready for that. Is kind of the sense that I've gotten over time. Why is that? Why is it that some people are just, hey, I'm fine right now. Everything's good. And they just don't want to change.
Well, the simplest answer is like the answer to most questions. It really is. It's fear-based, and it's a natural instinct that we all have to be safe. That's the bottom line. I was reading an article recently, and I wish I could attribute it. And the gentleman, I think it was a gentleman, was talking about how biologically and culturally we are wired for safety. And biologically, it actually starts in childhood.
Yeah.
That we're always looking to protect ourselves, but we grow into adulthood and I make decisions. I don't realize that's what I'm doing. So here I am showing up a certain way. And when I think I know all the answers, right? The safest thing for me, or my perceived safest thing, is just do the things I know. Don't get out of my comfort zone. Don't stretch myself. Don't step into leadership. Don't step into that breach. If I, as a leader, invite someone into a breach, I think I'm a movie guy. I think about the movie, that was the Indiana Jones with the Holy Grail. And Indiana Jones is in the cave and he's walking through and he gets this point. There's this crevice.
Yeah, right.
You die here.
That's right.
But the message is to trust. And he steps out and the bridge appears.
That's right.
But that's a lot of what we're thinking. So the biggest thing, and this is why it is a blind spot, it's coming from a desire, a natural instinct. I'll call it instinct more than desire, to be safe. But I don't realize that's what it is. And so I make decisions without realizing that's what it's about. And like part of my mission is help people to see that and then say, okay, this is about some fear. This is about safety. But now that I'm aware of that, how can I either minimize the risk or consciously choose to take the risk because I want what's on the other side? So we're bringing that fear out of that blind spot, because that's what blind spots are about. It's about bringing them out of the blind spot area so I can see them. Say, oh, now I can at least have an opportunity to make a different decision because I have a different perspective.
So I want to try an analogy on here and see how this kind of sits with you. I had this conversation with one of my employees actually yesterday, one of the people who works on my team. And I said, hammers always see everything as a nail. And the analogy I'm making here is this, what's analogous here is the hammer and the brain, right? They are both fantastic tools, but the hammer always sees nails. So whether it sees a nail or a screw, all it falls back on what is it known before. the mind is the same way. The mind lives in the past. It's seen triangle, 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 or nail, nail, nail. Whether it sees a screw or a nail, that's all it says. Well, hey, look, that's all it is. So if you work out of here, you're only going to be able to operate from what you've known in the past. You cannot go any further forward. But if that hammer looks at that and says, wait, this is different than any nail I've ever seen, maybe I need to evaluate by a different set of criteria. Well, that doesn't exist in your mind because your mind is about learning that's happened once before. And I think that's what you're kind of saying here. It's an opportunity. It is scary because, look, standing in one place is much safer than walking. But
or it's perceived to be. It's perceived to be.
It's perceived. That's exactly right. But inviting people into this thing that's saying walking is actually not that scary because you get to move away from danger just as intentionally. That actually might be the best solution for you. You gotta want that. Does that resonate with you?
It does. And in the course of sharing that analogy, you've highlighted another issue, Vinay. We talked about it with the snow globe. You said it's an invitation, right? If for me to take a risk, especially in an organization or a team, to step into that gap, like you're saying to me, let's say I'm on your team, you're inviting me into that space. It's still risky. So one thing I'm going to evaluate either consciously or unconsciously, and this one is actually a little more conscious, is how safe is it for me to fail here? And you determine that as my leader. Because if you model the fact that you've got to get it right, or even more importantly, how do you do it for yourself? This is where leaders too often do not demonstrate their own fallibility, their own vulnerability. So I see you always having the right answers and getting it right, and you never talk about getting it wrong. Now this became really scary for me to step in there. And I think a lot of leaders, back to blind spots, are saying to people, hey, I want you to try new things. I want you to take it on. I want you to risk. I'm here to support you. But they've not seen that modeled. They say, no.
Yeah.
Because I haven't seen it from you as my leader.
Yeah. I hear this phrase a lot from people that you've got to model behaviors that you want. And I think there's some truth to that. But you've got to model the effective behaviors, not just model a behavior. That's kind of pointless. I mean, if I want to teach an 18-year-old kid how to play soccer better, well, teaching them modeling behavior of an 8-year-old playing soccer is modeling behavior, but it's completely useless, right? It's ineffective at that point because they're way well beyond that. So I think what I'm hearing from you is that as a leader, just saying, I'm checking the box, I'm modeling behavior. Well, that's great. But if you're not modeling the right type of behavior, and I think that's what you're all about, is inviting people into that more effective. And I don't say good or bad because I actually don't know. You kind of have to determine that yourself. Once you start to model that effective behavior, others get the benefit of saying, maybe I should step up to that as well, or step into that as well. Is that fair?
Absolutely. And it gets back to the words we've both used, thoughtful and intentional. Because first of all, I want to think about, what do I want to create? What's the impact I want to have on this team or this person, depending on the context? Well, if I want this eventual impact or outcome, I need to be thoughtful about, so what behavior will best open the door for that? Recognizing that in every human being, there's going to be some element of safety going on, right? So if you think about that, one of the things I started sharing a few months ago was I called it the big three for leaders. The big three phrases, a total of 10 words that most leaders rarely use, but that needs to become their everyday vocabulary. I don't know. I was wrong. I made a mistake. And everybody who's seen that or seen my video, I get so much feedback of people saying, oh my God, my boss, my leader never says those things. And yet, so the leader's saying, I want you to grow, which means you are going to mess up sometimes. And so they've not been thought, they say I want an outcome, but they haven't thought about, does their behavior and their messaging align with what they're saying? And there's a disconnect, which also creates a trust issue. And this is, you and I think talked on the podcast about this, that every leader, every entrepreneur I've ever met, ever heard speak, every book, they've all talked about how much they learned from failure, universally. And yet, then you ask the question, do you have a culture that encourages learning through failure in your organization? The answer is usually no, or I think so, but you talk to the team, they go, oh, no, 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 no. Because typically the culture in an organization I've found is we encourage you to try new things if it's going to work out. That's not stated, but that's the undertone of the message.
So I love making my sports analogies here just because I've always played so many sports. And, one of the things that always amazed me was I don't think I first went downhill skiing until I was probably, 12 years old, something like that. And, I've always considered myself a reasonably athletic guy. I'm pretty quick study in things. But it would always amaze me that I would see these kids that are about 4 or 5 years old, they're only 3 feet tall. Man, without ski poles, they were just shooting down the hill. I was like, how the hell is that possible, right? What is it? And what I talked to one of the instructors because one of the kids in my beginning class was a 5-year-old kid. So why are they so fast? He said they don't have all these preconceived notions as to how they do things. As soon as they make a mistake, they see something, they quickly adapt, they respond to it, and change their behaviors. And they don't have any hangups about doing it. That's why they progress so quickly, because they're just constantly iterating on themselves. Fail, improve, fail, improve, fail, improve, fail, improve. And they get to a point where they're doing downhill, double black diamonds in the course of 3 years. And I'm still scared to go on my first double black diamond. And I think there's sort of an analogy in terms of how that is. We've got these things, these past patterns that we've learned that say, oh, you can't do that. Actually, you can. You just need to be comfortable with the fact that you're going to skin your knees up a couple of times, and that's it.
Well, and think about this. It's so attributable to or applicable to kids, because the younger we are, typically, the more risk we take because we don't know better. And then we learn not to take risks. I mean, if you think about this, think about a kid, a toddler learning to walk, right? If that child, because I don't have grandkids, but I have nieces and nephews, and I've seen them grow up. I saw my kids grow up. They start to walk the first time. What do? They fall over.
Yeah.
They don't sit there and say, oh my God, I fell over. I failed. They get up and do it again. Now it freaks out the parents because they're running across the room and they're falling all the time. And there's tables and sharp edges and the parents are trying to protect them. But the kid just says, I'm learning constantly. But by the time they get to be 6 or 7, they've started to learn to not make mistakes.
Yeah.
Because school started teaching them, if you make a mistake, you do something wrong. You didn't perform. You didn't meet expectations. This is where we change our conversations with our kids, and we don't have those curious conversations. It's more about, let's tell you what's true. And we learn these behaviors. As you were talking, Vinay, one I thought about was tying a tie. My dad taught me how to tie a tie. How do you think he taught me to tie a tie? The way he tied a tie.
That's right.
Well, turns out the way I learned from my dad is not the way most people do it. It's the strangest thing, because the way I tie a tie that my dad taught me, which he probably learned from his father, is a way that when you go to pull it apart, if you don't do it right, it turns into a knot.
Mm.
I think it's something called a double Windsor or something.
Okay.
And I see these other people who tie it and they just go because they learned a different way. And I've never learned a different way because it didn't matter to me. But that was ingrained as a kid. I could do it blindfolded.
Yeah.
Because that's how I learned it. Yeah. And so much of how we show up in our lives, in our work, in our leadership is based on what we learn from everybody around us. But we don't realize that. And that's when I can say, wait a minute, someone taught me this. Is this really going to be my way instead of their way? Yeah,
there's so much. There's so much there. So I want to kind of get a little more to this snow globe leadership, right? How do you know that somebody is ready to shake the snow globe? Because as in somebody says, I know there's a glass ceiling. There's something that I'm hitting up against. And it's been frustrating me for 15 years because I don't think this is a new concept. It's been there for thousands of years in terms of this capability within humans, right? And that's what we're talking about, this capability within humans. It's always been there. But how does someone know that they're ready to kind of take that next step? Is it just that desire? That's it?
That's a very complex question. Let me try and simplify it. First of all, the fact that they're asking the question, they're not usually going to say, am I ready for the next step?
Okay.
They might think about it in terms of, am I ready for the next position? But there's an unsettledness in them. There's this sense that there's more in them. Or there's this sense that some of them, they're living every day with palpable anxiety, right? So if I'm talking to someone, not everybody's ready. Back to what you said, if it's on my team or someone around me, I invite. I do it from a place of invitation. And I think one of the things in terms of developing our people around this, something I create I can't remember if they're analogies or metaphors, I don't know. But it relates to learning to ride a bike. Most of us, someone taught us how to ride a bike. Yep. And I remember teaching my kids how to ride a bike. I don't remember being taught too long ago. But the basics of learning to ride a bike, I know what it's not generally. It's not a 30-second class of, hey, Vinay, here's a bike. The secret is balancing and pedaling. That's it. That's pretty much what it is to ride a bike. But if I just tell you that and say, go ride, not terribly effective.
That's right.
But instead, what I do is, hey, it is about balance and you need to pedal, but it's really about balance more than anything else. So what I do is I run alongside you and I hold the bike seat, right? I hold the seat and when I do that, I tell you one of two things. In fact, I tell you both things over and over. You can do this and I've got you. So I'm telling you, you can do this and nothing really bad's going to happen. And sometimes I start to let go of that seat, but I don't tell you. I don't let go and then start screaming at you, hey, I let go because you fall over. So I let go, I hold on, and then eventually I let you fall, don't I? But I don't take you to the top of the hill and say, hey, I hope you stop because there's a highway there. I take you probably to the grass and let you fall. And then I take you to the street because you still got to fall on the street because that's where you're going to be riding. But I do it in steps. And I often now share that that's a great model for developing our people. They want to know that you believe in them and they want to know that it's safe to fail. They're going to be okay. And you're doing it with them instead of standing at the end and saying, hey, come to me. I'm the leader. You got to catch up with me.
So let me play that back to you a slightly different way, right? If you're desirous of kind of making that shift, and I'm going to use the analogy here, moving from walking to riding, you want to go faster. You want to be more effective in your ability to move forward, right? And you see that shift as going from walking to cycling. Well, cycling is going to require something that you haven't done before because walking principles don't necessarily apply to biking. Well, you need somebody to kind of walk you through that process, right? They're not going to do the work of balancing. They're not going to do the work of pedaling. They may help you hold the handlebars in the seat and put some training wheels on for you for some period of time. But if you've been able to go through that transition before in your life, because I suspect there's a number of people in this world who've gone through that transition. Yeah, sure. I'm sure there's some fear around that, physical, emotional, spiritual, all kinds of levels. But if you could do that, you can do this too. Right? Because that's the level of intensity that you're going to see. And it is just like riding a bike, because once you do it the first time, you can get back on that bike again and you might be a little rusty, but you can come back and revisit again. Is that the way people should think about that? Is it a fair way to think of it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and then the question becomes, but the counter to that, Vinay, is if I learn to ride a bike a certain way or in certain conditions, and the conditions change, I may have to relearn how I ride the bike.
That's right.
And that's what we're seeing right now. Leaders knew how to ride the bike. They rode it a certain way. And now the economy has changed. The way business is done changed. The workforce has changed. The mindset of the workforce has changed. And many leaders and organizations are still riding the bike the same way. Now, I do want to add this because I made this mistake a long time ago and I learned from it. I had a team member when I was a lawyer and had a law firm. Boy, she was a go-getter. She was so good at her job, but I was struggling with her. She was really amazing at her job. And she was like, she stepped up and did things. But I found that my biggest complaint was she was always asking me questions and not solving for herself. So I complained to my coach. I had a coach, my first coach. I said, I'm really frustrated with her. And he looked at me totally straight faced and said, you did a great job. I said, what are you talking about? He said, you did a great job of training her. Because what do you do when she asks you a question? I said, well, duh, I answer it. And as soon as I said that, it hit me. The blind spot came out and whacked me. But here's the mistake I made. I said, wow, I'm the cause of this. The thing I would have done differently is I did not invite her and I didn't have enough communication with her, and I just cut her off. I stopped answering her questions without an explanation. And so now she grew beautifully, but it was painful for both of us. And now if you went to her today, I'm still in touch with her. She would say, so those were the most miserable 3 months of my life. And they were the most helpful 3 months of my life. Because I didn't help her learn to ride a bike. I said, here's the bike and there's the hill. She rose to the occasion. That could have gone really badly. So the outcome was good, but I realized from that I needed to do a better job of the invitation and creating the steps. So it's not like jumping off a cliff without a parachute. At least you got a rope. And I didn't do that well. Now I would do that differently.
So in this world, I feel like, at least here in the United States, that I see on my perspective of the world, so many people are focused as leaders of companies on bottom lines, balance sheets, P&Ls. And a saying that I have is that if profit is your prime directive, it's short-sighted. But if empathy is your prime directive, profit comes along for the ride. And the whole idea is that it's not about the bottom line. It's about the bigger picture. If you have the bigger picture, the bottom line comes along with it. And I feel like people are always looking about, what is my return on investment? What am I going to get out of that? And I almost want to answer that with, you're looking at it the wrong way. There's a better way to look at that. There's a bigger picture to encapsulate. How do you answer that when people come to you and say, hey, what am I going to get out of this? How do you answer that question to shift them to say, let me invite you a different perspective?
Yeah, depending on the size of the company, that's either the $500,000 question or the $5 billion question. And it comes down to, there is a safety element in this, because most of us have been brought up in businesses where the key was return on investment. It was on financial performance. And that's where the focus was. So that's all we're used to. So the idea of saying, hey, let's look at empathy first. Let's look at vulnerability, taking care of our people first, it's almost heretical. It's just like, what are you talking about? It's got to be about the numbers. So first you have to be open to the possibility that getting it right with your people can create the outcomes, because you say it as a fact. I believe it's a fact, but a lot of people have never been led that way or had never been rewarded that way. They've been rewarded for paying attention to the numbers. It takes a courageous leader. We had a guest on our podcast named Mark Peters this summer. He's, I think, second generation of a company called Butterball Farms. He took over the company with no experience, virtually none. Young guy, his father died early. And he said, we're going to transform the mission of this organization. He's like this young guy coming to a company that's very successful. And his mission was, we're going to enrich the lives of our people. That's our mission. That's their mission. It's been that way for 30 years now. And he talks about how it's worked and how the return on the investment in your people has been multiplier effect. But he also acknowledges that he said the company almost went out of business. And I asked him, I said, was that because of the people choice? He said, no, it's because I didn't understand the financial side of the business enough. It wasn't. The people was the right decision. That was the right mission. I just didn't know enough about the business side. I was creating growth when we weren't ready to grow. So he said, the thing is, we went through a bumpy period, but it wasn't because of the people. And that you have to have a willingness to trust at least enough to try that out, because, you talk about this question, who's most important? Is it your customers and clients? Is it your stakeholders, whoever that is? Is it your people? And a lot of people say, well, it's equal, but nothing can be truly equal. Ultimately, you have to make a decision. Are you investing in your people, are you investing in the financial returns? And who's more, and if your customers are even slightly more important, your people will know that. Because I believe if you treat your people well and help them grow and develop, they will grow your company exponentially. You have to be open in that possibility and there is a risk because there's no guarantees, but take that risk to put that priority first.
So I want to use a stat that I've learned that, I mean, when we talked on your podcast, I mean, I use the stat, this whole idea of the great disengagement, or whatever the name is. There's lots of names for it now, right? But the Great Resignation. There's a stat that disengagement in the workplace is at a staggering 74%. It's been around that number for quite some time now. Even if it's 68%, still, what a massive number. And the way someone translated that to me, if for every $100,000 in payroll, $68,000 of that, $74,000, it just goes right down the toilet. I will tell you, as a person who knows simple math, that if I'm going to spend $100,000, I want to get $101,000, $110,000, $500,000 out of it, not 32. And the fact that I'm going to spend $100,000 in payroll on somebody or persons, right? And I'm only going to get $68,000, or $32,000 out of it because I've lost 68 or 74. That's ridiculous to me. I would never want to do that. But in order to run my company, I have got to pay people to be there. Yes, that's a living wage for them, right? So this idea of when people talk to me about this idea of return on investment, say, why is it that 74% are disengaged or that 68% are disengaged? It's because they're not what your focus is. And I think that's what this whole idea of snow globe leadership is all about, is let's shake it up a little bit. Stop focusing on this, because what was standing behind you and propped you up to the point where you are today is what got you here. How do you make more of that? Because if you can get your people to, I remember as a technical guy, when I was an engineer working for companies, I used to go back home and I had trade magazines spread all across my tables. I was always reading those things. I think I was a fantastic employee in that regard because my boss didn't have to ask me to do it. I did it because I loved it. Isn't that what you want your employees to do? Right? Your people to go home and say, I can't wait to get to work the next day because I get to do this. And I think that's what this is all about, shifting that leadership style so you can invite them into that. Is that right?
Well, absolutely. And the question is, do leaders really want that? And do they really, and are they changing the behaviors, changing the actions that create that? And I agree with you. I mean, the engagement numbers, they're so easy to dismiss. And here's what I think one of the big challenges is. I certainly can't, and I would offer that you can't either, tell a leader that you're not leading well and therefore your company's failing. What we're talking about a lot here are opportunities, not necessarily definitive outcomes, in the sense of, are there I'm going to just say the word, are there shitty leaders that their companies appear to be doing well? Absolutely, they are. Now, at what cost to their people? And so there's missed the opportunity to enhance the lives of their people. And I believe there's an opportunity because whatever they're achieving financially, I deeply believe that their results would be incredibly higher, multiplies higher, if they did it differently. Yeah. Are there some really good leaders whose companies don't do well? Yes, too, because there are realities of things in the marketplace, et cetera. So the thing here is, it's not like, how many times do we read every day? I'm not going to mention the company, but there's a company that financially has been done well for decades. They've been around for multiple generations. And recently they had to change out their CEO because some things came to light that were really not good. Some emails, it was one of those email things. And I looked at the way that leader thought and the way that leader responded to this challenge. And I looked at it and said, what a missed opportunity. And is that how that person was leading all the time? How might that company be different? And I think that's one of the challenges, because a lot of people look at me and say, Jeff, last year we grew by 25%. Our profitability was up. We beat our expectations. And I'm not doing anything you're talking about. Well, then I go to, so what's the price your people are paying for that? And what would be different if you had done it a little different with your people? Because I believe they not only would achieve the same results, they would be exponentially higher, more improved results, and their people would be happier, more engaged, have better lives, which means better families. Because what leaders need to remember is ripple. It's about the ripple. And too many leaders think the ripple is about their financial results. Yeah. But the ripple is the lives of every person that they are supposed to be serving, that are part of their team, who for whatever reason have chosen to be a part of that organization. That's the ripple, more than any financial numbers they create.
Gosh, our time went really fast. And I want to make sure that anybody who's been listening to this podcast, you can kind of see how Jeff is really about helping you shift that perspective. I talk about going from first or second gear into fifth gear. If you really want to be able to make that shift into going faster, more effectively, you can't do what you've been doing for the last 5, 10, 15, 25 years. What got you here today is not going to get you to tomorrow, is kind of the saying. And if you want to be able to shift that perspective, I really recommend that you reach out to Jeff. I've always loved my conversations. When we've met over drinks that one time, I feel like I walked away with 10,000 more questions than I walked into it with.
Those are great conversations.
Those are good.
With or without the bourbon.
That's right. But those are the kind of conversations I love to be part of, just because they make me challenge what I think I know so that I can walk through that doorway to what is next. Jeff, if somebody wants to reach out to you, I'm going to put all your information out, but if somebody wants to reach out and they're watching all this, what's the best way to reach out to you?
Well, you can just send me an email, Jeff, if you can spell my last name, NISCHWITZ group. So Jeff at nischwitzgroup.com. And I'm blessed because my name is so unusual. Pretty much if you Google Jeff Nischwitz, I assure you it relates to me.
I wish I had this distinction. If people spell ramen the wrong way, they think I invented chicken flavor.
I know, right?
I used to tell people in college that they're like, "Are you related to the ramen family?" I was like, "Yes, in fact, I invented chicken flavor." I used to love it when people believed that.
Well, in fact, you should say to them, "Yes, I actually am. I'm part of that family, and thanks for reminding me. I'm too rich to talk to you."
Jeff, well, anybody who's listening, thank you so much for taking some time. Hopefully you got some nuggets out of this. I know it helped me refine a lot of my thinking and my perspective in doing this. But Jeff, I really appreciate you spending some time with me and taking the time to walk through what you do for people and how you help lead them ride that bicycle better.
Well, thanks. I love these conversations, as you know, Vinay.
Yeah, I do love them too.